Thank you very much for your fine speech, and we call upon the member of opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we abhor the notion when closing government comes out and tell you that Chile is a good example of a military takeover, particularly in the case the kind of human rights abuses that come out when Pinochet has locked up prisoners and killed people using his death squad. We also abhor the notion that she tells you that Charles de Gaulle being a military leader is a takeover because Charles de Gaulle was an elected leader of the Fifth Republic of France, and we don't think it's a relevant example in this entire case. The entire opening government has come up with this notion that basically that democracy is bad and therefore military is better because it is more efficient and more corrupt, and therefore it will lead to better policies, and therefore it will definitely generate all the kind of better policies without any negative consequences. We are going to challenge this entire notion through my extension. I'm going to prove to you why. Opening opposition tried to show you, in terms of a very theoretical example, and try to show to you why Egypt works. I'm going to bring it down to Greece and prove to you that challenge that comes out when closing opposition, why Greece will necessarily be less accountable, why Greece will be more corrupt under a military regime, why it will be worse both in the short run and long run, and unable to fulfill the kinds of aims the opening government tried to tell you. The benchmark for this entire debate that no one has told you, and we're going to tell you clearly set out in closing opposition, that is assumed throughout, is that one that will ensure democracy and ensure the continued economic prosperity, and if it fails on their side, their motion should fail. Let's go quickly into this notion. First of all, the entire notion that comes up regarding the, will the military listen to the EU? We say, first of all, Mr. Speaker, on the first ground, we don't think that the military will, we think that yes, the military may listen to the EU. Why? As DJ had pointed out to you, if the EU is the one who put the military in place, it is highly likely that the military will be the one listening to the EU because that's the one that sanctioned in the first place. If that is the possibility, therefore it only excludes that only one of opening governments, either Prime Minister's speech or Deputy Prime Minister's speech, makes sense. Because Prime Minister said it is for austerity, Deputy Prime Minister said it is austerities or not austerity. You cannot exist with both, because essentially what happens is that the EU is for pro-austerity, there's no way you can have the other. Even at the point that whereby EU takes over, the notion is that the people will still see that it's a domination by EU, domination by Nazi Germans, another time again, which is a simple factor why people are unhappy with austerity measures, because it's an imposition by the European Union, imposition by the Germans. Fundamentally, they're still going to react badly against the kind of motion that comes out against the EU. Also the notion, it is unlikely, no thank you, they will come up with a notion that the military will actually, in any case, be pursued. Because as I pointed out to you, austerity measures and non-austerity measures are binary, you cannot have both. Because the international market demands for austerity in order to restore confidence is something that the economics on the side of opening government never really understood. I'm pretty certain that I've made it clear in this side. You have to choose either or. If they were to take the simpler measure and they said that the military government is unable, and that's the challenge for closing government, because they're trained and they're cohesive, they can make better decisions. We say no. Why? Because the military has been infiltrated by sympathizers of fascist parties, sympathizers of the New Dawn. It's unlikely that they will be able to pursue equal policies when your rank and file, no thank you, are unlikely to be cohesive beside one thing. So the kind of notion that you say that the democratic government is unable to push the kind of notion, a cohesive notion, is also likely to occur in the case of a military government, no thank you, and we say it's unlikely. The most important thing we say that in this all the tendencies, all the kinds of costs that accrue in terms of democracy are also necessarily accrued in the cost of the military, with no potential for accountability, no potential for takeover. And furthermore, what we want to prove to you is why is it unlikely that this EU, and they never proved to us why the EU would definitely be able to kick the military out. First of all, most evidently, because the military has the guns, the military can control. The EU has no military force barring Operation Atlanta in the coast of Somalia as a patrolling force to take over that. No country has any incentive to go to war given what has occurred in Afghanistan and Iraq, right? That's the first. And it's also once again going to be by a domination by the Germans again. It's their negative perception, no one wants to be side on an evil war or unperceived war. Second tier, the EU is unable to do and generate democracy as well as that even though it won its Nobel Peace Prize. Just take a look at how corrupt Bulgaria is, how corrupt Romania is, despite the EU kind of motion of trying to sanction. No thank you, we think that that's fundamentally false. Furthermore, let's grant the entire notion that maybe the EU would work. I mean, maybe the military government would work. Maybe it's good. Maybe we say that it's unable and unlikely to any way engender any positive change. Why? Yes, we agree that democracy already results in riots occurring. But these riots will occur anyway because of a 52% 52% support for austerity, 48% support for anti-austerity. When austerity fundamentally affects your lifestyle, fundamentally affects the way you conceive yourself as a Greek because of the way a domination by EU, you will challenge that notion because you're angry. And no matter whether an EU rule will come up, no matter whether a military rule takes over, you will still find a way to go out and protest, and fundamentally the kind of protest that comes up will not occur. If you say that the kind of protest will occur and you want to crack down in order to achieve economic efficiency, we say the kind of notion that human rights is protected does not achieve in your model. It's fundamentally something that cannot be achieved, and we say that there's a definite harm and cost which is negative. No, thank you. So finally, what I've proved to you is that also in another tier, even if you assume that this Li Jing have pointed out to you, that it's unlikely that in this given economic crisis, and also opening government had conceded to you, that it's due to external factors, right, and not just internal Greek factors, which means the entire improvement of the economy is very unlikely because of the economic climate growing around the EU is being poor in itself, as well as the American economy. This effectively gives a carte blanche for the continuous government and domination of the military regardless. And we don't see what necessarily, no thank you, they haven't proven to us why the military can actually use this as a pretext to continue the kind of domination, particularly when I gave you a POI, because the military itself is already corrupt, given in the times of boom years, they've continuously tried to increase the spending power. No thank you. What does it mean when it tries to increase the spending power? What it's trying to show you is that relative to other parties, relative to other government ministries, it's trying to seek power. If within government ministries it's trying to seek power, we don't see why necessarily when it's given power, it will want to relinquish power, particularly in this case, right? Particularly in this case when there's a carte blanche, particularly when the economy is unlikely to improve, particularly that there's no means of an economic recovery because the Greek, as I said, the Greek in itself, the economy is so heavily indebted, right? So I've proven to you why is it unlikely, and why is it corrupt, and why there's unlikely growth to occur in the model. But most fundamentally, what I want to prove to you is that, most importantly, this would affect not just that. As pointed out, but they never tried to show you, because an economic government by a military tends to be associated with a very negative connotation, even if it were not true. People would pull out, investors would pull out, and the climate would pull out. Fundamentally, this destroys your economy further engendering the ability for this military to take over and military to continue its rule. When the military is comfortable with its rule, when the military is used to its rule, the notion of having a democracy and the fact that you can potentially solve the problem, the notion of having a democracy is useless. This gives the military a pretext to say, look, we are better in democracy, therefore we should continue democracy. On two fronts I've proven to you today, Mr. Speaker, two things. One, their case do not necessarily improve democracy in the long run or short run. Two, economic growth does not occur from the model, despite the massive controversy on both sides of opening government as well as opening closing government. We are very proud to oppose this motion.